over right as this is starting. Great. Okay, so Facebook is telling me Zoom and Facebook are talking to each other. We may already be live on Facebook. The progress bar is progressing. Amazing. Here we go. I think we're going live. Waiting for the confirmation. Perfect. Okay, and we're live on Facebook. Wonderful. So welcome to another episode of Financial Phoenix Rising, where I share two kinds of stories. First, I tell the many stories of women who have come from a less advantageous place in their lives and come to a place of greater financial freedom. And the goal of doing that is to help inspire women who may be feeling that they, would really like to be more financially free, but they're looking at their current circumstances and just can't see how to get from here to there, and tell themselves stories of self-doubt or of questioning their own knowledge or their own capabilities. And so by telling these other stories, I really hope to share examples of people who have gone from, a place of less advantage to a really good place, and that will give other women hope. And then the second type of story I tell is I also invite financial experts to come in and share their tips, knowledge, and experience with us. And so today I have invited Sydney Wong, who is my guest, and I'll introduce her in a moment. And she's going to share with us her story of how she's gotten from where she was to where she is now. And I really hope that you find it inspirational. Before we get into that and I introduce Sydney, though, I would like to just remind everyone that this series is not financial advice. So it's for inspiration purposes only. Anything shared here by myself or by my guest is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Please do your own due diligence before taking any actions, financial or otherwise. It's also not a step-by-step guide on how to grow your own financial literacy or learn to invest. If you're interested in specific tips around that, then my guests and I both have other programs that we can tell you about at the end, through the page, through the comments, and in a brief outro at the end of this episode. So today I'm talking with Sydney Wong, author, award-winning entrepreneur, founder, and CEO, and we'll be talking about how she went from being the first generation of her family born in a first world country to becoming a company founder and a winner of Startup Canada's Women Entrepreneur of the Year, and a winner of the top 6 startups in Montreal by Startup Canada. And that's just to mention only a couple of her wonderful accomplishments. So I also want to just remind you, I do have an email subscription list where I share additional things. Again, I'll put that in the post at the end. So no need to worry about that right now, but there is another spot where I share updates. So now on to today's guest. Sydney Wong is an author, female entrepreneur, and founder and CEO of VenturX, a conduit for startups to track metrics. As a successful entrepreneur, Sydney likes to share the tips and tricks that she uses to be productive and efficient while keeping an emphasis on the importance of having a balanced, impactful life. Thank you so much for being here today, Sydney. I'm excited for you to share your experience with our listeners. And do you want to say a quick hello?
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to meet your audience.
Oh, I'm so glad you're here. So let's start off with where you came from. So your childhood, what things were like in terms of wealth, money, family, the context that you grew up with, because that'll provide a nice foundation for what got you to where you are today. So my first question is, you were the first generation of your entire family born in Canada, or in any first world country for that matter, as you shared with me. So what are your earliest memories and experiences of money in your family? Where did your family struggle around finances, and where did you see them succeed?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So I'm actually the very first person to ever be born here, and so my name in Chinese means snow sparrow, and snow being as in Canada we are in the land of snow, and sparrow is actually the bird of China. So it was like you have immigrated to the land of snow, and is symbolizing a hope for the new generation. And so there was a lot that kind of came with when I was born, and I was born oddly enough in Victoria, BC. in a bunny hospital, as in like we're famous for having so many different wildlife and animals and stuff, but that hospital has like 100 bunnies all around,
Oh
not
my
inside,
goodness.
but like all around like the wildlife like part of the hospital. So the first things that I've ever seen was snow and then a bunch of bunnies. It was that was my first memory of Canada, and yeah, and so I've always grown up knowing that my parents were from immigrant families, but I went to basically an immigrant school when I was in elementary school. Like everybody there had a different accent, and everybody there was a different color, and it seemed like that
Mm.
was perfectly normal. And I did not
Mm.
know the rest of Canada was mostly not like that, and the most of the U.S. for that matter. And so yeah, and so then like it was very normal for me to see my parents work 3 jobs all
Mm.
the time, both of them, and then being taken care of by my grandparents because that was very cultural in our culture, and it was also free, so that was great. And they actually shifted their work shifts like to
Mm.
be able to take care of us every hour of the day. So when we were not in school, one person would like go to work, and then the other person would pick us up to then take us home and then like make us dinner and then drive us back, kind of thing. So this was our daily routine all of the time, and it seemed perfectly normal for me. And then when I grew up, I was like, other parents don't have like 3 jobs. That's so weird. and and so in order to like provide us all of these opportunities to be Canadian was a strong right for us that we really worked hard for. And I can give you an example. So my parents don't know anything about like Christmas and Easter because they didn't grow up with it, but they got all of this like random stuff that they thought was appropriate for these occasions. And then they had to like ask their coworkers and people who were Canadian for advice on like how to do this. So then just like us not really knowing all of our financial status every single part of our childhood, we also really didn't know how other kids celebrated these kinds of Canadian and American traditions, except for what we saw on TV. And then they would get things to make it as elaborate for us as they can. So we got like a tree that lasted for 30 years. We still have this tree. This tree is still in our basement. We never went to like cut down a tree because that seemed like so wasteful. So we still have this tree from a store that does not exist anymore in Canada. And then we had for Easter, we had like cotton balls put all around our room. So then we would go find chocolates, and these were the things that they picked up, these little parenting hacks that they learned about how to raise like a Canadian child. So then
No.
they would never really feel like they were an immigrant child.
Mm.
And these were the things that I really remember, because you grew up that way and you always felt like everything was always going to be okay.
Yeah. You know what I'm really hearing when I hear you tell that story, and I want to dive in a bit more on the 3 jobs and that part of it, but it sounds like you were really surrounded with love and support. It really sounds like you had all these people taking shifts to take care of you and make sure that you were taken care of. And also this like, how do you do Christmas? How do you do Easter?
Yeah.
As someone who grew up here in Canada, that's just been there my whole life. So it's so
Yeah.
interesting to hear this perspective of having to learn how to do that, which I could imagine if I was moving to a culture with different rites and rituals, I would also have to do. So I love that. So tell me a little bit more about the 3 jobs, because I think we're often used to, or at least in my world, more people have a career in one job and that's the thing they focus on. And hopefully it sustains them in a way that they can make a living that supports what they need. So your parents had to work 3 jobs. It sounds like that felt very normal until you got to see other examples. But what was that about in your family, having to work 3 jobs, and whether that was just in the context of Canada or was also true before you moved here? Just tell me a bit more about that. Why were three
Well,
jobs
yeah. So
necessary?
before they moved here, they were just like in communism, so that was not
Mhm.
ideal. And so then they moved here, and so like it was very odd the way that things were there. Like when they went to school, their physical education class, their PE class, was working on a farm for
Mm.
the country, and this was their like class, and they would be graded like that was a real thing. And none of this really made any sense. So to them, like working anywhere was better than their situation when they were like 8 years old. And so
Mhm.
this was like for children. This wasn't for like teenagers or people who were capable of things. Like these were for young children. And so they wanted to, of course, build a better life than what they have, right? But yeah, so like for example, my mom was a nurse, my dad was a cook, but they also invested in houses and then renovated it, and we're part-time landlords, and we're renting out the basements of our house as well to university students, and then helped out at grocery stores, at places that would accept people who didn't speak a lot of English. And so they were picking up things all of the time. And it wasn't about how much resources you had, it was about resourcefulness. And kinds of lessons that I brought into my life as an entrepreneur is to always understand what resources are out there. So one of the stories from my childhood that I really remember was so one of my favorite teachers, her name is Mrs. Gady, and she was my first and second grade teacher, and she was asking me strange questions about Christmas I didn't really know, because I was like 6 and 7, and my English also just wasn't great at the time. So I really wasn't understanding why she was asking me these things. She was asking how we celebrate it, if we celebrate it. And I'm like, I don't know, like, how do other people celebrate it? Because I had nothing to really compare to, right? And so she signed us up for this community program, which I didn't know was a community program. I just thought this like came from Santa because I was like 7. And this was they came at like Christmas Eve. These people with like a huge truck, right? And they gave everyone in my family, because they had all of our like family information and ages and everything. They gave everyone in our family lots of presents. We had like a truckload of presents, like a U-Haul, like full of stuff. And people were like wrapping toys and gifts and gift baskets and all of these things for our family. And we realized that it was from my teacher. And it was such a beautiful moment, and it was something that she wanted to provide. And I realized later that this was part of these kinds of programs where schools like ours, because we were not in a very well-off neighborhood, that schools like ours had a lot of kids that did receive these kinds of benefits, as long as the community sponsor them and or just propose or apply or whatever the process is. And so these were the kinds of things that that you really do remember having even though you don't have a lot, but it is a lot of different kinds of resources, gifts, and opportunities that you get to enjoy.
Wow, that's incredible. You know what I'm struck by as I listen to you is two things. One is I'm hearing all these things that were happening that were probably coming from a place of less advantage, right? Like having to have 3 jobs. It sounds like there was a need to have 3 jobs because one job alone wouldn't provide the opportunities and the income that was necessary.
Yeah.
And having to have a community program that supplies gifts is, again, not coming from a place of advantage, but that you got to be blissfully kind of not aware of that and just receive the beauty of it as a child, because you were being provided with these things and didn't really know any better at that age because this was just your world. So it's so interesting. So I'm curious, given that some of the other guests I've had on this series have talked about being really aware of being in a place of disadvantage or a place of struggle. It sounds like you got to be, at least for a while as a child, kind of blissfully unaware that these things were not all just normal things that everybody experienced. So I'm curious about how that shaped you and what you took out into the world beyond the entrepreneur piece, which I can absolutely see why you're an entrepreneur now with these beautiful entrepreneur roots from your parents. So what lessons did you take away, or what learnings or what mental model of wealth and work did you take away from that experience, seeing your parents work 3 jobs, having these things brought to you like the gifts and the community programs?
Yeah, I got to realize as I was getting older that there were a lot of things I didn't know, right? And I didn't know that because I can only see it through the eyes of a child. And they purposefully never burden us with the things that were happening. So there were a lot of things that we didn't know. They would always make sure that we were aware, you know, if we wanted to take dance classes or gymnastics classes or go to basketball camp or those kinds of things, that these things were considered expensive, but we had no actual idea in terms of what the value of things really were, because it wasn't something that we talked about normally. And then I remembered just like about 10 years ago or so. So I was already an adult by then, and my mom, she and I went out to dim sum, and she's like, I think she was just recently like going into retirement, you know, because she worked 3 jobs so she can retire young. And she was talking about, she took a sigh and she was like, I think that if I look back in my life, I was really lucky. And I would like just yelled out at the dim sum restaurant. I was like, how is that possible? You lived through communism. Sounds terrible. And I was just like, these worst things could possibly happen to you. How is that even possible that you would say that? And she said that she was talking about a sense of community. She was talking about a sense of friendship, and how there were a lot of people that were supportive of our family and of her and everything, and being able to come to a new country, but being able to find a job, even though, you know, you didn't speak the language, because she happened to work at a job where all of her clients spoke Chinese. And then they were in need of certain kinds of industries. So they wanted to train immigrant, you know, newcomers to work in these certain industries, because they didn't have enough people. And these kind of training programs were accessible and available. And then we went to a public school that was free, and we had a lunch program that was like, first, I also did not know this. I don't know how this lunch program was so cheap, but it really was. Like, this is absurd to me now. But it just seemed perfectly normal then. And yeah, and so she was explaining that there were all of these opportunities that came about because people opened doors, because there were opportunities, and as long as you can see them, then you were going to be okay.
Yeah, that's interesting. So looking back now, it sounds like you have much more awareness now of how things actually were, right? You're talking about realizing they had to work 3 jobs. You now know that that's not the case for everyone. Realizing there was these lunch programs, these Christmas gift programs that probably were coming from a place that not necessarily of huge abundance and wealth, right? And you're realizing that now, but it sounds like as a child, you were blissfully ignorant and got to benefit from all those beautiful things and feel really good about it. Looking back at that, and you mentioned not feeling burdened, so your parents really intentionally not burdening you. Looking back at that now as an adult, how do you feel about that? Do you wish it had been any different? Do you wish you'd been aware? Or are you really grateful that they, I guess, shielded you from that so that you could just feel abundant, it sounds like?
Yeah, I think that it always makes me sad when there are kids who are from less advantaged positions that feel the stress of their position, because
Yeah.
kids, they can't really do anything. And
Yeah.
so I really do think that, you know, having the opportunity to feel like you are equal as
Yeah.
every kid you went to school with, or
Yeah.
you have the ability to always be better, allows us to then, you know, all of us graduated with advanced degrees. We all have bachelor's, master's. My youngest brother's in medical school.
Wow.
I got my MBA when I was 21 years old. My middle brother was valedictorian at all of his schools. And
Wow.
so these seem also normal to us, because we never felt like we were under a systemic issue. We were not a social issue. If we were not raised to be a social issue, we were raised to be equal. We were raised to be able to compete with anybody else, and we were raised to be proudly Canadian.
Yeah.
And we've made sure that that was always to our advantage, and to make sure that everyone else knew it too. So it wasn't ever like you had things that couldn't be taken from you, because it was part of your upbringing, and it was part of where you were born. And these things are, you know, they're part of your identity in so many ways. So part of not burdening them, depending on like how aware you really want them to be, that stays with their identity.
I love it. I love it. So it's great to get that childhood background. Let's move on to you growing into adulthood. I'm interested in the impacts, the continued struggles, where there was area of struggle, where there was progress for you. So what happened for you from there around money specifically? So you grew up with this background where you were blissfully unaware, although there was some disadvantage. And you had that belief that anything was possible and that you were just the same, that equality that you talked about. So how did that manifest for you? How did that manifest in your choices and your experiences? Where did you personally struggle around money or wealth? And where did you succeed as a result of that sort of root upbringing for you?
Yeah, so after I graduated high school, I had 4 scholarships to go to McGill University. And so I went there. So that's where I live now. I live in Montreal.
Yeah.
And even with 4 scholarships, I got to realize as I got a little older that, I was very proudly Canadian. However, if I went to a school in a different province, that
Mm,
those kids were so much more favored. It only works in one particular province. But
mm,
with me working so hard to get 4 scholarships, which meant that I had to spend every day of my summer, my 2 month summer, writing essays for these different scholarships and doing interviews for them and everything. I was interviewed to go to different Ivy League schools as well, which also took up my summer. But these other kids, all they had to do was like be born here, and they got 50% off their tuition by
mm.
being born here. And then I felt that, this was so strange and unfair. And why is that? And then, you got to see a lot of different aspects of exactly the same thing when you're older too. Like some people will be chosen for things and it's not based on merit. And that will seem very unfair. And that takes away from all of these other parts of, I thought everybody had an equal playing field. I thought everybody, was treated fairly and all of these things. But as
Yeah.
you grow older, especially in the financial pillars of life, that won't necessarily be true, right? And so, being seen as a minority, an Anglophone, a woman, all of these things, this does not work in my favor. But in a lot of ways, when you're applying for certain things, certain positions, and all of these things. And so always learning to stand up for the things that you deserve and why, making sure that all of the things that you do deserve is based on merit, is based on facts, and
Mhm.
you're bringing these up in any diplomatic kind of way, and trying to make an impact for people who are going to be in your position in the future as well. So
Yeah.
these kinds of things are always in the back of my mind when it comes to growing up in a financially unequal world, and starting from the fact that I went to university as an adult, going getting 4 scholarships just to get the same as somebody who was just born here.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
insane. And that is and that's also some of these things that will also stay with you, because you're still so malleable, you're still growing, and you're still developing at that age, that these are also things that stick with you for a very long time, and hopefully these things stick with you and encourage you to do something positive, right?
Mm.
And so, as an older adult now, like way after school, I have learned the power of you're the average of 5. So, that's one of the things that I talk about in my book, How to Have a Good Day. So, this is, well, it's in the title, you have a good day. But how to have a good day in terms of the, let's say, financially, is that there's a great quote from one of my favorite comedians, Steve Harvey, who said, if you got 9 broke friends, you're going to be the 10th broke friend. How do you become more financially savvy? How do you become more financially, not necessarily stable, but mentally strong? How
Mm.
do you learn about different opportunities? How do you do all of these things? Is you got to surround yourself with people that you admire in a financial way, right? Are they good at understanding stocks? Are they good with money, or are they always in debt? Are they the friend of yours that's always needing to borrow $20 and will never pay it back, right? So who are these people that you are around? In terms of wanting to fix your own situation, we are unfortunately usually a product of our environment. So you get to choose your environment in an active and smart and intelligent way. And I hope everybody does, because these are the kinds of things that that affect you a lot in your day-to-day, but also in the long term. These are things that adults have to do all the time.
I love that. I hadn't heard that quote before, but it reminds me what you're describing there in terms of what we surround ourselves with. It reminds me of that other quote, which I'm sure I'm going to totally butcher, but it's the quote that talks about your life being a reflection of the 5 people you spend the most time with, and so I'm hearing that as through a financial lens in the case of the quote you shared, but I think I've often thought about that as a really valuable way to be doing inventories about who, what energy and what people am I surrounding myself with if my life is in any way feeling less than what I would like it to be, right? If I'm getting different results, that's one of the checks that I tend to do. So I love that you bring a financial lens to that. So it sounds like your resourcefulness that you learned from your parents served you really well. I mean, you applied and got scholarships, which is a huge achievement even to get one, and you got 4, and these are amazing things. And it sounds like you went from this place where you felt as a child that everything was equal, and then suddenly the hard reality of life, you had to face that, where suddenly you realize, oh my goodness, no matter how much hard work I put in, matter how much scholarships I earned, my hardest and best still won't necessarily result in fairness, because there's these systematic structural elements at play that I can't control that are going to affect the results that I get. So I have lots of empathy for that, and good for you for being able, and your family, your siblings, to be able to have such achievements despite that. And so I'm curious, as you faced that, you said, having looked at that, you had to figure out how to tackle that, right? Knowing that that's the case. So what would you say is a way that you did that specifically when you got faced with that, when you got faced with, my goodness, despite all my best, despite all this hard work, despite all the essays I'm writing, I'm facing these structural systematic issues. How did you handle that in a concrete way? Maybe that might be of interest to other people who are listening to that or who are facing that. Because a lot of women, especially in career, especially in tech, do come up against that, right?
Yeah,
what would you offer based on your experience?
So there's a few things that I do. So I still live in a French-speaking province, and so I have never received, no matter what, I've never received a single grant or a loan or a scholarship from here specifically, because they were not given to people like me. So I looked outwards. So the reason that I, won the Women Entrepreneur of the Year was from Canada. It was not from Quebec. So that is to look more outward, in terms of opportunity. Don't just look at the 4 walls that you're around. I know it is really hard because we're all getting out of COVID, but it is a big thing to do, as well as just to make sure that, the world is bigger than you think it is. And you qualify for a lot more things than you really think you do, right? And then the other thing is to make sure that you don't downplay. So there's another great theory called the one up, one down theory. And it is super prominent in men and women, also super prominent in immigrants versus people that are not immigrants. And so this one up, one down theory is based on self-evaluation and self-perception. This is a human resources theory. And so how it works is that if you had a manager that asked a female and a male employee, like how they would rate themselves, how they were doing, and all of these things, the male employee generally one-ups himself. Even if they're both exactly average, and the female employee tends to one down themselves, right? So they would grade themselves a little lower, they'd be a little bit more self-critical, and all of these issues, because you reflect the way that you want people to think of you in certain ways. But if you think of yourself as a little bit less qualified than you should be, then you will probably only get opportunities that are going to disappoint you later, right? And so I do my very best to counteract that, being very aware of these theories and being very aware of how people are raised. And it can be uncomfortable for my male evaluators to say things like, and these are things people have said to me, it's very rare for somebody to mark themselves so high. And I just smile and go, yes. And then
I love that.
And another one is that I've actually applied for like maybe 30 UN jobs when I was when I was just getting out of university, just to realize, knowing that I do not qualify for a single one of them, just to realize that like being able to speak African languages was more than just like an option. It was very much required. And I qualified for none of them. And yet I applied for 30 applications, because why not, right? And so then I do encourage people that even if they don't actually hit every single qualification, to not one down themselves and go for these opportunities anyway. There are a lot of scholarships that are for women, grants and investments. I know that because I'm an investor, that are desperately seeking out certain minority groups and marginalized groups, and we can't find them. We can't find them because they don't apply. Right. And then what ends up happening is that there is a women's equity fund here in Canada, and they end up having to choose all male startups because there weren't enough women that applied. So, and they had to use up their fund, whatever amount that was, like millions and millions of dollars, to give them to people that were not necessarily part of their target market, but they still had to use up their fund because not enough women applied. And these are things that are not necessarily shared, because it's like that didn't really hit their goal, but it's always like a two-way streak, right? You can't assume somebody's going to say no to you before you even tried. They will 100% say no to you if you don't try.
Right. We get zero of the opportunities we don't try for, right? Absolutely. I love that. And I love I like your one up, one down language. I hadn't heard that particular one, but again, it reminds me of the statistic that I had read, and I might get the percentages wrong here, but the gist of it is that women end up feeling like they need to know at least 80% of a job and its qualifications before they feel ready to apply for a job. And if they don't see that they match 80 to 90%, they'll just self-select out. So they won't even apply. Whereas men, I think once they know about 60% of their current job, they feel ready, or maybe it was even 20%, they feel ready for a promotion and feel confident that whatever they don't know, they'll figure it out on the job, and it doesn't stop them. Obviously, we're generalizing here, and obviously that's not true of every single woman, every single man. And, you know, even saying woman, man in today's world is not as inclusive as we'd like to be. But the gist of it is that, and it's, you know, one of the best experiences I ever had was, I talk about these statistics a lot with people, in particular young women that I mentor, because I really want them to know, but like you are. And one of the most rewarding things I ever heard was one of these young women coming back to me saying, you know what, I was going to go and apply for this promotion, and I found myself doing that thing where I wasn't going to, because I didn't check all the check boxes. And then I remembered the statistic that if a man was in this situation, he would be going for it. And I thought to myself, I don't want to let somebody else get this job just because I self-selected it. And she went for it and she got it. And I was so thrilled. So I think even telling these stories and sharing these statistics and this research is so important. So I love that you're doing that. I think that's great. And maybe as a follow-up, we can also, I'd love to hear some more about the specific grants and opportunities you see being available to women, so we can do that as a follow-up to the episode. So let's move on to where you're at now, because there's a lot of things you referenced there that I really want to hear about. So one of the things I'd love to hear is, tell me a little bit about where you've gotten to in your life now, and how you got there. In particular, your story of going to Silicon Valley, I think, is really amazing. So I'd love to start there. So how your path to your current company started. It's a great story.
Yeah, so I had just left this consulting firm here in Quebec, and I knew that I didn't want to go kind of go back into that environment. So a friend of mine said that if I was very serious about learning more about tech and startup, then I needed to move to the Valley. So I bought a one-way ticket, and then I flew down there, and then I moved in with him. And I was there for like a while. I was there for like months. And then I was meeting a lot of different investors and entrepreneurs and all of these people. Everybody had a purpose, and everybody seemed to have three jobs. That was perfectly normal for them. I was like at home because everyone was doing something and also an Uber driver, right?
Oh
Right.
my gosh.
Super normal there. And so and so then I wanted to build something that helped solve the problem that they were having, which was funding at the early stage. And so, and then, going back to investors, they had an issue with, okay, all of these startups, we want to invest in them, but they are not ready. So that's how VenturX was born. It is a tool that helps track your financial runway, your conversion, your retention, and your engagement. So all of these kinds of metrics are really important for early stage tech funding. And once you've been able to hit all of these ones, these are the metric-based, merit-based things that I've learned over the years to be very important, like I said. And these are the things that I really think people should be judged on. They should be judged on their success and their achievements, and less about where they're from and why and all of these things, right? Because
Mm,
you want to know that you're investing in the best, not you're just investing in referrals, which is also
mm.
great, but they don't really help you in terms of these kinds of hard numbers. And so that's why I wanted to build something in this industry that hasn't been changed in many years, something that would bring closer to the needs of both parties.
Yeah, it sounds like you're really trying to level the playing field there a little bit, right? If you're evaluating startups on those objective metrics,
Mhm.
then hopefully there'll be less bias around where the money goes for
Yeah,
startups is what I'm hearing there. And you're right. I think that's a big problem. I think sometimes, and I'm curious about your thoughts on this, um, from when I talk to many women who are founders of startups who have, dabbled in trying to get funding, one of the things I hear is that some of the things that would help them to achieve some of the metrics, even those things are difficult because, for example, having a network of people that you can go to get advice to help you make traction in areas that would help you to achieve the metrics is not as accessible to a woman founder because there's not this deeply built network that some of the male founders have. And so, what are your thoughts on that? On even having things again, we're going back to structure and systems, right? To have the structure and the systems favor women founders in a way that will allow them to achieve the metrics so that when the metrics are measured, they're able to be successful and competitive. What are your thoughts on that?
yeah, so you definitely would need to go more niche, right? So there are a lot of funds, including our fund, that, hopefully they are actually doing what they say they're going to do, which is if you want to promote diversity, if you want to promote investing in more women, go find them and go really look at what their metrics look like, right? And so when you have the metrics to be able to prove how well you're doing and how well the business is going and what you want the money for and all of these things that really tell the story of the business, this is when investors need to really turn the page and be like, okay, so we need to find out more about this person. Why do we want to work with them? Is it because their business is great? What are they doing? Are they solving a real problem? Is there a real need? How much impact is this making in the future or in the world or to like technology or people? So all of these kinds of things should be what it is telling the real story, right? This is
Mhm.
what people want to do, and then what they're actually doing, like I said, the example with the women's equity fund, right? They couldn't find enough women to actually apply. That's the other half of the story. So both
Mhm.
parties really do have to come together for this to work hand in hand. And that's why, building this kind of a system is something that doesn't just give investors a bunch of reports that are like black and white. It also gives people who didn't have that chance before the confidence to really see what their business looks like and start applying with all of the success that they have already achieved. And these are the kinds of things that once you have built this up, more and more people will start to take notice.
Mhm.
Nobody ignores successful people. that is insane, right? Nobody's ignoring successful people. People ignore, whatever things if they're not doing well. But when you are rising up, you will have less and less time. You will have to say no to more and more and more meetings. It'll be up to you to decide which meetings to take and which ones you just can't take, because your days will be shorter instead of longer, and these opportunities will become drowning to you at some point. I know that I've been going through waves of these things. Every time you win an award, or you get recognized for things, or you're in the media, or like whatever the case is, right? You're getting all of this attention, and then people are like, hey, let's follow up, let's strengthen our network, our relationship. I want to introduce yourself to this. So you will have more of these things kind of come up as your metrics in your business and everything gets better. So they do go hand in hand. You need all of these elements. And one more thing I would also like to add is that every month I do a reflection. So it's one for health, finances, lifestyle, habits, routines, and relationships, right? So you are thinking about how things are going in comparison to the last month, and you are making active choices rather than reactive choices, right? So your active choice is one of the hardest ones. I'm still not good at this one. Is to find the most impressive person that you know in your network, okay? And they're probably not somebody you know well. Probably. They're probably somebody you've met a few times. Whoever that person is, I know that you're probably thinking, whoever's listening, you're thinking of that person. Whoever that person is, ask them to refer you to their most impressive friend. So one of my dear friends, Rashina, she is a fantastic human. So I went back to her and be like, hey, you wrote this. I want you to introduce me to your most impressive friends.
That's amazing. I love that. I've never heard that before. I really love it. I do a similar reflection as you of this holistic part of my life, and do a lot of community building that maps to each of those parts. But I've never heard this particular question of who's the most impressive person, and can you meet them? That's really amazing. What I love about it is not only can I see the value of that, but I love anything that stretches our comfort zones, like asks us to be courageous, and stretches us in a positive way, right? Not a harmful way. And so as soon as you say that, my internal feeling is, oh my goodness, that feels scary to do. And also that feels exciting to do, right? It's great. I love it. I love that.
It's hard. Another trick that somebody else, this was from someone that I read about and I follow in Silicon Valley, his name's Noah Kagan. So a trick that he does, because he travels a lot around the US for conferences and Southwest, all of these different things, is he tells people, well, hey, I'm going to be in this location, for the weekend. And then he goes, I'm going to, he said, he would say to his friends who are in this location, let's say he has 5 friends in, I don't know, Texas or Boston or New York. He invites his 5 friends to come out to dinner or a bar or something. And he goes, I want you to invite one of your close friends that you admire or you like, or whoever you think I should meet. And I will buy everybody drinks.
So that's amazing.
People together, but people that he likes, and they are even more interconnected, right? And he does this all of his travels, and it's such a smart thing to do.
Amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love it.
And always happy to be like, hey, this is so and so. And when you talk to somebody, whoever is in your network in that manner, you are trusting them in their judgment, and they will take that very seriously.
Yeah, that's amazing. And it sounds very enriching for everyone involved, right? Because each of those 5 friends may or may not know each other, but probably they won't know the friend that each of them is bringing. So everybody gets enriched in the process. I love it. I love it. All right, well, let's move on to some of your other successes. So you've had some great successes. We've mentioned a few of them. Since starting VenturX, you've won the Startup Canada's Women Entrepreneur of the Year, which we mentioned, won the top 6 startups in Montreal by Startup Canada. You've been featured in Innovate Montreal book in 2019, been nominated for RBC's Women of Influence, and been nominated for 3 Small Business BC Awards. You've also recently wrote the book that you referenced earlier, How to Have a Good Day. I'd love to hear a little bit more about the book. What's it about? Tell the audience what it's about. You and I have already chatted about it, but I'd love you to tell them about it, and what motivated you to write it, and what do you hope that people get out of it, that they walk away with?
Yeah, so I wrote this book during the first part of the pandemic. I guess is the great way to say it. So last year, and I saw that a lot of people that were coming from the office to working remotely, or people that were starting their own businesses on the side because of the craziness that was happening to them, they were losing a lot of structure. They were losing a lot
Mm.
of foundation and their routine and happiness, because humans inherently actually really like some kind of structure and some kind of stability, because it makes them feel strong and it makes them feel like they're moving forward. And so this is the kind of book that is written in a similar style to one of my favorite authors, Tim Ferriss. He's the author of The 4 Hour Work Week, and it's the kind
Mhm.
of book that is a very easy read, only 50 pages. And it is available now on Kobo. It sold 1,200 copies in the first 2 weeks on Amazon. And
Wow.
so, yeah, and so now it's now on Kobo, and then what it does is that it's the kind of structure where you can read parts of it, come back to it, refresh your mind, and all of these tips and tricks you can. It's like a trial and error to see what is best for you, right? These are just some of my favorite ones. And as a productivity and efficiency enthusiast for many years, I finally get to share it, which is amazing, because normally I just talk about it to like friends who did not ask anything, just like unprompted. But now I get to share it with people that I think are really finding it very useful. We've had really great reviews. We still have a strong 5-star review. So that makes me super happy, that if it makes a difference in one person's life, then that's all that I would ever want. So it is really incredible to be able to contribute my first book out. And yeah, and so I hope that you guys get it, and I hope that you leave reviews and let me know how you think.
Amazing. I love it. I love that in COVID, you found the time not only to do all the business stuff you're doing, but also let's write a book. That's amazing. And I'm a big fan of some of Tim Ferriss's books as well. So that's amazing. Um, we're getting close to the end here. When you think back to what was previously I'm going to back us back to some of the earlier conversation we were having, but if you think back to what was overall your biggest blocker earlier in your life to financial freedom, so I'll give you a moment to think about that, whether it was in the context of your family uh, and you weren't aware of it, but they were still blockers, versus where you're at now with all of your successes. What do you find, this is a two-part question, what do you find you still have to consciously work on? I think we all have those things that we've learned, but that we have to remind ourselves about every day, because there's still not a solid habit yet, and we still struggle to kind of keep them as a regular habit in our lives. So that's question one. What do you still struggle with and have to remind yourself about daily? And second part is, what are you proud to have overcome? So struggle that you keep working on, and biggest sense of pride or success for you.
Yeah, so I think that the struggle that I still work on right now is a book that I'm in the middle of, about in the middle of. So it's from Tony Robbins, and it's called Money. And it's so much longer than you think. It's like 750 pages. And so when I said I'm in the middle of it, I mean, like, it's been like 300 pages. So it's just still not 100% done. So we'll have to talk again when I'm finally finished. But the thing is that people nowadays always want more and more and more and more and more, right? And that is a struggle in life. It's not just a struggle financially, it's a struggle in life. Of course, this book is about finances. So what he did in the structure of this book, which is so interesting, and I highly recommend that you do this exercise for yourself, with whether you think that you're not doing as well financially or whether you think you are. Okay, it's a reality check. Then the reality check is, what is the minimum that I need to survive or live or whatever, right? And then the
Mhm.
next level, you have to turn the page. There's like 5 levels to this, and I will not remember all 5. But then the next one is like sustainability. Well, the first one I think is like sustainability. The second one is something like financial freedom, which is the words that we use all the time, but it doesn't mean what we think it means. It's what
Mhm.
society has told us that it means, right? And then you go to all the way to like level 5, which is talking about the absolute, ultimate freedom, if you got to have a genie and make all of your financial wishes come true. But the questions are, what are the things that you actually need to have? What do you need to have access to? What are the things that you want? What do you want to wear, touch, feel, eat, whatever it is, right? These are
Mm.
all list items of things.
Yeah.
And then you
Yeah.
start to realize, you're like, I don't really want a private jet. I want to have a ticket to go to XYZ places, right? Or like,
Yeah.
do you want to buy one versus do you want to rent one? And a
Mm.
great example is I don't need to have, I don't know, my own second or third or fifth home in another country. I want to have the right to have a timeshare in these locations, or be able to rent, I don't know, a celebrity's home. Like, let's say if you thought really big, right? If you were to rent like Ellen DeGeneres's home, or like, I don't know, like Michael Jordan or whoever's home it is, and you're like, this is the most amazing like vacation getaway, but do you really want to own it? Do you really want to deal with that? Probably not. You probably just want to like Airbnb their place, and it will be amazing as well. So these are the kinds of things that you need to list down. You need to list like how much it actually costs and things like that. So why I say that's like a constant struggle is because of all the media, of all of the information that we're overwhelmed with, of what you're supposed to have, how you're supposed to feel, and all of this just kind of strips away from your mental strength, and a lot of that then negatively affects people when they're struggling financially, or maybe they're not actually struggling like financially, but they feel like they're supposed to have more than they need to. So that balance of mental strength is something that is very difficult all the time, whether you're an entrepreneur, you're in working class, you're little and like, you know, you wanted freezies but somebody said no. Like, these are all things that that you need to ask yourself a lot, and the more you practice these exercises, the better off you're going to be, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. You're reminding me, because what I'm getting from that overall is the idea of inventorying what we actually need ourselves individually,
Yeah,
like, you, Sydney, me, Natalie, not
yeah,
like society says we should all want this in some kind of homogenous way. And then I don't know about you, but for me, when I buy into that, then I just feel like I'm on some kind of like hamster wheel, right? Oh, gotta want that. Go, 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 go. And then, like you said, there's always going to be someone, especially with social media now, that's got more for you to strive to try to achieve.
yeah,
But if you bring it back to what you actually care about, suddenly there's a lot of freedom in that, because you can let go of a lot of things, which I'm hearing you talk about there. It also reminds me of, have you read the book Your Money or Your Life? Is that a book that you've
no,
read?
I
I
should.
highly recommend that.
Okay.
The nutshell that it's one of those classics, but the nutshell of what I took away from that is that she does two basic things. I mean, she gets you to inventory as well, but one of the things is to ask yourself what your values are. So before you even think about what you want money for, what is really mattering to you? And make sure that your money aligns to that. And I really resonated to that because, for example, I really care about travel. I really care about community. So I'm going to care a lot more and be much more willing to put thousands of dollars into something that achieves those goals than I will to even put $10 into something that I don't care about. And
Yeah,
so you can get a lot more satisfaction, not so much in how much you make, but making sure that what you do have goes to the things that bring you joy, that
yeah.
actually fulfill you. And I kind of hear some of that in what you're saying there. So that's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's
and you asked about the biggest achievement. So during
yeah.
COVID, I have started an angel fund. So it's a $10 million
Mhm.
fund here in Canada, and I work with a family office that is from Korea, and we actually are about 20 angel partners now, I believe. And so each one of us has a different mandate, and so I wanted my mandate very strongly to be promoting founders of diverse backgrounds, and female-led founders, and minority-led founders, and things like that, and being able to have a more inclusive startup community that actually reflects the country that we live in, as opposed
Mhm.
to not, right? And so these are the kinds of things that I want to do more of. And so if you are a female-led founder and you guys are post revenue, post product, and are able to show the traction and the metrics that we talked about in this interview, please feel free to reach out. We'd love to meet you and kind of
Amazing.
see how we can help.
That's amazing. And I know that you support startups in a variety of ways. You and I met through CEO, which is
Yeah.
a huge global organization of really amazing women supporting other women and trying to solve that problem we talked about earlier of women sometimes as founders being disadvantaged in accessing some of the funding that male-led startups or more established startups with more connections can access. And so I know that you're doing it both through your business, through supporting CEO and participating in that. And so I'm curious with your lens in all these different areas for women, so many of the women who are listening to this are looking for inspiration on how to improve their own financial situations, or at the point of wanting to invest themselves in different things and exploring what might they invest in as ways to grow their own wealth. So I'm curious, what would you suggest to women who are at the point of wanting to invest and maybe are really curious about doing something like what you're doing, where it's not just investing in the market or investing by buying a home themselves, but would be interested in doing things like investing in international real estate the way it sounds like you do, or investing in startups as a venture capitalist? What would you suggest as the very first way to start exploring that or accessing that? Oh, and I think you might be frozen a little bit. Let's give it a second. There we go. Go ahead.
Can you hear me okay?
I can now, yeah.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me? I'm going to turn off my video for a sec to see if that helps.
So so there's a few resources that I would recommend people look into. So one of them is, of course,
oh, I think you
Nathalie?
might be. Yeah, I'm here. You froze for a quick second. Go ahead again.
Okay, so there are a few resources that I would recommend. So of course, to promote having a diverse portfolio is very safe, and it's still like the best way to go about things. But you should definitely have a bit of knowledge about each of these different kinds of options, right? So if you want to learn more about stocks on a very everyday basis, great book, Rich Dad Poor Dad is a great book. It talks about how to invest in different stocks, how to manage your money, the way that people really see money. And of course, it touches on real estate and things like that too. So great book. It has actually several volumes. If you want to explore more into the startup space, I know that CEO does have a fund where women of all different backgrounds are able to then invest their own money into a pool. So kind of similar to an angel investment syndicate. And then they invest in other women-led funds, women-led startups. There are women-led funds like the ones that we've mentioned on this call. However, I do recommend that you actually look into seeing if they actually invested in the diverse founders that they have claimed to, and call them up and see how they work together, and do a bit of due diligence on those sides if you're going to invest in those ways. And then there are also different portfolio managers if you want to invest in things like real estate or ETFs or stocks or index funds or mutual funds. So all of these have different kinds of managers that the book Tony Robbins' Money would actually tell you that you can easily just do yourself without a manager. So there are lots of different kinds of options. It does depend on where you kind of see yourself in the next 5 to 10 or 20 years, right? Do you see yourself investing in, women-led startups? Do you see yourself being an angel investor? Do you see yourself having a healthy stock portfolio? It's always a great time to get started earlier than later, especially if you currently have a stable income or a stable job and everything. But these are the kinds of things that are always opportunities that people later in life wish they had started earlier.
Absolutely. I'm going to hope my video doesn't get us cut out again. Thanks so much. I see we're almost at time. So I'll part with a question that I like to ask all my guests, which is, when I say the words financial freedom to you, Sydney, what does that look like and mean to you?
Yeah, so to me, I think that finances mean a lot in terms of access to things. Do you have the access and ability to achieve whatever either meeting a certain person or achieving a certain goal, having certain experiences. And how do you get there? You know, do you buy it? Do you find a different way? Do you have different alternatives? Do you have a certain network? What is it that you can do that will help you provide this kind of access to things, right? And the reason that I say that is a quote from Damon John, which was talking about how he's one of the judges on Shark Tank. He's a great judge, and so great to watch too. And so yeah, financial freedom isn't just, you know, you are going everywhere and spending things everywhere frivolously for no reason. Everything does have a purpose, but it just comes to what you want access to, why, how you can get it, and everything. And it goes back to, you know, it's not always just about your resources, it is about your resourcefulness.
That's amazing. I love that, thinking of it as access, whether it's access to more time, to support, to people. I like that word, access. That's great. Well, we're at time. So I will close us off here. Sydney, thank you again so much for sharing your wonderful story and path with us. So much there to take away, so many great references to resources and other wonderful leaders to follow. That was really great. We'll be sharing some of those out afterwards. If you haven't already, be sure to check out Sydney's recently published book, How to Have a Good Day, which you can find on kobo.com. And Sydney has various other ways that you can reach her. Sydney, if people wanted to connect more with you, follow you or your work, I know that there's a few different links that they can go to, or different platforms. What would those be? What would you recommend for them?
Yeah, so we are super active on Medium blog as well as YouTube. So please feel free to check those out. We put up new content every single week. We actually are putting up a new one on Monday. And I'm also available on LinkedIn. So you can add me on LinkedIn and just reference this podcast as well. And of course, our website has a direct contact us page. So that would go directly to my inbox if you are one of the startups that are looking for funding or have questions about it, or just want to come to our next webinar to learn about funding. So all of those are available.
Amazing. Thanks, Sydney. So reminder for everyone that this content is not financial advice. Do your own due diligence before making any financial decisions. If you enjoyed today's episode, please let me know in the comments. Share the Facebook page for Financial Phoenix Rising and today's episode with others. Get more inspiration and tips by signing up for my email list and newsletter at nataliecrosbie.ck.page/financial freedom. You can also find a sign up link on this page description. Stay tuned for the next episode of the series coming later this month. Thank you again, Sydney. Really, really appreciate having you here today. Have a wonderful rest of the day. Ciao.
Thank you for having me.